An urgent need for allies to make the decisions necessary to step up, provide more ammunition to Ukraine.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warning that the lack of political will is having consequences on the battlefield in Ukraine. Those calls for allies, including Canada, to do more come as the alliance undergoes its largest Nordic military exercises since the Cold War. Sweden, which officially joined the alliance last week, is among the nations participating. As the chair of NATO's military committee, Admiral Rob Bauer is the alliance's most senior military officer. And I spoke with him about NATO's readiness and Canada's ability to respond if called upon in a crisis. Admiral Rob Bauer, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, David.
If I can start on the question of Ukraine, we saw the NATO Secretary General calling on NATO allies to urgently send more ammunition to that country. And this is at a time that Ukraine is expending more ammunition than it is very often receiving from allies. What is at risk here?
Well, as the Secretary General said, David, the Ukrainians do not lack courage, but they lack ammunition. And I think that is what is at hand here. We are now in the third year of the war, the 751st day of what the Russians said was going to be a 3-day war. So it is amazing that Ukraine is still a sovereign, independent state after so many days in a war. The difference is that if the Russians stop the war today and go home, the war is over. If the Ukrainians stop the war today, they have lost their country. So for them to be able to continue the war, we need to continue to support them.
And yet Putin's strategy seems to have been from the beginning either that Western support would not come, or if it did come, that it would eventually evaporate. Are we now at that point, given how difficult it is to get money and sufficient numbers of weapons to the Ukrainians in their hour of need?
We need to ramp up the industrial production. We need to do that fast. In our democracies, that takes more time than in an autocracy. So the Russian industry has changed to a wartime economy and is on a wartime footing. Therefore, it means that everything in their economy is focused on producing for the Ministry of Defense and for the armed forces. I'm not saying we should go to a similar situation in our part of the world, but I think what is needed is that we need to focus on this more, that we need the help of the financial world, we need the help of everybody, governments, industry, financial institutions.
You know, you talk about money and you talk about focus, and I do want to talk about Canada in this context. Every single time we here in Canada interview a NATO official, we're talking about the 2% that Canada has not hit and is not on track to hit. And yet, at the same time, we're talking about readiness. Internal reports from our own Department of National Defence show that Canada's military is only 58% deployable, that a lot of the fighters, the ships are old, in some cases decrepit, in many cases not working, and therefore wouldn't be useful in some sort of crisis to NATO. Is that the direction that NATO should be heading in, that a NATO nation should be heading in?
What we are now looking at is that we have changed to collective defense as a result of the situation in the world, in particular with regard to Russia, a much more aggressive Russia, which of course started earlier in 2008 in Georgia, 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, and then the full-scale war in 2022. So Russia changed from being a partner of NATO to a threat to NATO. And therefore we changed our military plans, we changed our focus to collective defense again. Mm-hmm. And all the plans that we had, that the leaders agreed in Vilnius, basically now focus on being able to deter and defend against the Russians, the Russian threat, and the threat from terrorist organizations.
If I can just jump in, I recognize that you don't want to criticize a political force, but let me ask you this question in a different way. Is the direction that many NATO nations that they're heading in, is it to increase their readiness? Is it to increase spending? Is that the direction that you see most allies heading in?
Absolutely. And the reason for that is the collective defense. And because time no longer is on our side, it's not for us to decide when a crisis or a war starts, how long it will take, where it will take place, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to be readier than we were. We need more readier soldiers, we need more capabilities, we need more stocks, and we need more training. And that is exactly the direction that, that NATO is heading towards, and that Canada is asked to move towards as well.
Norway is a country that you were in this week, and like Canada, an Arctic nation, you were there to visit NATO military exercises, some of the largest in the alliance's history. What can you tell us about what the goal of these drills are, looking at a nation that shares some border areas with Russia?
So Nordic Response, the exercise we visited a couple of days ago, is part of Steadfast Defender, a large exercise that takes place basically from mid-January till the end of May. And that exercise is about reinforcements from North America to Europe and then overland towards the borders with the adversary, and then all the military exercises that are connected to it. And Nordic Response is that exercise in the northern part of Europe, primarily with the US, UK, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and a number of other participants. So that is about fighting in the high north under harsh conditions and looking at the working together, especially now that Sweden is, since 7 March, a member of the alliance as well. So that is the focus of the exercise, reinforcements of Europe, and then being able to use all those forces in the different battles on land, in the air, and at sea.
Part of the game, of course, with reinforcing Europe, particularly from North America, is in the event that Russia isn't done, that Ukraine was just the start and that it aims its sights next on perhaps the Baltic region or perhaps some of the Scandinavian countries. What is NATO doing to be better prepared to defend against that possibility?
Well, the most important thing that we need to do, David, is that we are deterring those threats. And the best way to deter those threats is that all the individual allies make sure that they can defend themselves. That is one of the things that is in the treaty. Article 3 says so. It starts with that. And once you are able to defend yourself properly, then the ability to help others, as in Article 5, one for all for one, is much easier. So we ask all the nations to focus first and foremost on being able to defend yourself with proper armed forces, with the right stocks, with the right training, with the right number of people that are have all the resources that they need. That is what we ask from all the nations. That's what we also ask from Canada.
Admiral Bauer, very grateful for your time. Thank you very much.